Right now, you're probably exhausted. Another late night grinding. Another morning forcing yourself through tasks that feel like swimming upstream. You push harder, work longer, yet somehow the things you want most remain just out of reach. What if I told you that every productivity guru, every motivational speaker, every success coach has been teaching you the exact opposite of how reality actually operates? An ancient Egyptian master named Thoth understood something we've completely forgotten. While we're taught to force our way through life like desperate swimmers fighting waves, he discovered how to become the surfer who rides them effortlessly. This isn't another productivity hack. This is about why your grandmother manifested more in her quiet moments than you do in months of hustle. Why children get what they want through pure expectation while adults exhaust themselves chasing the same outcomes. The technique Thoth left behind was considered so powerful, so fundamentally reality-altering, that it was buried for centuries. In the next few minutes, you'll discover the exact code he used to align with natural forces, rather than battling against them. Picture this. Over 2,000 years ago, in the dusty archives of ancient China, a quiet librarian named Laozi was making observations that would threaten the very foundation of how civilizations understood power. While emperors mobilized massive armies and generals devised elaborate strategies for conquest, this unassuming keeper of scrolls was watching something entirely different. He studied how water carved through the hardest stone, not through force, but through persistent gentleness. He observed how wind moved mountains grain by grain, never fighting the landscape but dancing with it. He noticed how bamboo survived the fiercest storms by bending rather than breaking, while mighty oaks snapped under the same pressure. What Laozi discovered in those quiet moments of observation was so radical, so contrary to everything his culture believed about achievement and mastery, that it was considered borderline heretical. In a world built on conquest, domination, and the belief that more force equals better results, he proposed something that seemed impossible. True mastery comes through gentleness, victory flows from yielding, and the greatest power emerges not from resistance but from perfect alignment with natural forces. This discovery became known as Wu Wei, often translated as effortless action or non-action. But here's where most people get it completely wrong, and this misunderstanding has trapped countless seekers in spiritual laziness for centuries. Wu Wei isn't about doing nothing. It's not about sitting in meditation all day hoping the universe delivers your dreams. It's not passive resignation or mystical waiting for divine intervention. Wu Wei is about finding the precise frequency at which reality responds with minimal effort. Think of it like this. Imagine you're conducting the most complex orchestra ever assembled, with instruments representing every force in your life. Your relationships, career, health, finances, opportunities, even your internal emotional states. Most people approach this orchestra with a sledgehammer, trying to force beautiful music through sheer volume and aggressive conducting. They wave their arms frantically, demand louder performances, and wonder why the result sounds like chaos. Wu Wei is different. It's discovering that perfect whisper, that exact frequency that causes every instrument to naturally harmonize. It's finding the sweet spot where minimal input creates maximum resonance. When you hit this frequency, mountains literally move, not through force, but through alignment with the natural vibrational patterns that govern how reality operates. This connects directly to one of the most profound principles in Hermetic philosophy, the principle of vibration. Everything in the universe, from the smallest subatomic particle to the largest galaxy, moves and vibrates at specific frequencies. Your thoughts vibrate, your emotions vibrate. Your actions create vibrational patterns that either harmonize with or create dissonance against the natural frequencies of what you're trying to achieve. Raw effort, the kind our culture worships, creates vibrational dissonance. It's like playing wrong notes loudly and wondering why the audience covers their ears. When you force, push, struggle, and fight your way toward goals, you're essentially broadcasting on frequencies that reality naturally resists. The universe doesn't respond to force, it responds to resonance. Here's what's fascinating. The ancient masters understood that there are hidden frequencies, specific vibrational patterns that most people never discover because they're too busy making noise with ineffective effort. These patterns were considered so powerful that they were often kept secret, passed down only through mystery schools and esoteric traditions. The Kybalion, one of the most important texts on Hermetic principles, reveals many of these patterns. At Insights Academy, we've spent years studying how these ancient vibrational principles apply to modern achievement, and the results are nothing short of extraordinary. But let's get practical about what Wu Wei actually looks like in real life. When you're truly practicing effortless action, several things happen simultaneously. First, you develop an almost supernatural sensitivity to timing. You begin sensing when to act and when to wait, when to speak and when to remain silent, when to push forward and when to step back. This isn't mystical intuition, it's practical pattern recognition operating at frequencies most people never access. Second, you start noticing leverage points everywhere. Instead of applying massive effort across broad areas, you identify the precise spots where minimal pressure creates maximum results. A master of Wu Wei might spend months observing a situation, doing what appears to be nothing, then make one perfectly timed move that accomplishes what others couldn't achieve through years of struggle. Third, resistance becomes your compass. When you encounter friction, instead of pushing harder, you pause and ask, what frequency am I broadcasting that's creating this resistance? Often, the answer reveals that you're operating from fear, attachment, or ego-driven forcing rather than natural flow. But here's the critical warning that most teachers won't give you. There's a dangerous counterfeit of Wu Wei that has trapped millions of people in spiritual bypassing and passive resignation. This false version whispers, just trust the universe, while you avoid taking necessary action. It says, everything happens for a reason, while you ignore your role in creating results. It promises that meditation and positive thinking alone will manifest your desires. True Wu Wei is incredibly active, but the activity happens at levels most people never recognize. It's like a master chess player who appears to casually move pieces while actually calculating dozens of moves ahead. The external action looks effortless because the internal preparation has been so thorough, so aligned with natural patterns, that the outcome becomes inevitable. The ancient Chinese had a perfect metaphor for this. They said, Wu Wei is like water finding the ocean. Water doesn't struggle or force its way downhill. It simply follows the path of least resistance while remaining absolutely committed to its destination. It goes around obstacles rather than fighting them, but it never stops moving toward where it belongs. This is why Wu Wei was considered forbidden knowledge in cultures built on force and domination. If people discovered they could achieve more through alignment than through struggle, entire power structures would collapse. If citizens realized that gentle persistence could overcome brutal force, how would emperors maintain control? If individuals learned to work with natural patterns rather than against them, they might stop exhausting themselves in systems designed to drain their energy. The implications of this ancient wisdom reach far beyond personal achievement. When you truly understand Wu Wei, you begin seeing how our entire culture has been built on the opposite principle, on the belief that more effort, more force, more struggle automatically equals better results. And you start recognizing why so many people today feel completely exhausted despite working harder than any generation in human history. I know what you're thinking right now. Great, another person telling me I can achieve everything without effort. This sounds like every New Age guru promising instant manifestation if I just think positive thoughts and wait for the universe to deliver my dreams on a silver platter. Your skepticism is not just valid, it's essential. Because what passes for Wu Wei in most spiritual circles today is nothing more than dressed up laziness masquerading as ancient wisdom. Walk into any meditation center, scroll through any spiritual Instagram account, and you'll find the same toxic message repeated endlessly. Just surrender. Let go. Trust the process. The universe will provide. Meanwhile, people sit in lotus positions for years, burning through their savings, waiting for cosmic forces to magically deposit their dream job, perfect relationship, or financial abundance into their laps. This isn't Wu Wei. This is spiritual bypassing at its most destructive. True Wu Wei has been so thoroughly corrupted by modern interpretations that most people wouldn't recognize authentic, effortless action if it struck them like lightning. The difference between real Wu Wei and New Age passivity is the same as the difference between a master archer's moment of perfect stillness before releasing the arrow and a lazy cat sleeping in a patch of sunlight. The archer's stillness contains everything: years of practice, acute awareness, precise timing, focused intention. Every muscle is relaxed yet ready. Every breath is controlled yet natural. The moment of release isn't passive surrender. It's the culmination of disciplined preparation meeting perfect opportunity. The sleeping cat? It's just sleeping. Here's where ancient alchemical wisdom cuts through modern confusion like a blade. The alchemists understood something that today's spiritual teachers have forgotten entirely. There are two types of dissolution. True dissolution, what they called nigredo, the dark night of the soul, is an active process. It's the conscious breaking down of false structures, the deliberate facing of shadow material, the willful surrender of ego attachments that no longer serve. False putrefaction, on the other hand, is just decay. It's what happens when you mistake stagnation for spiritual progress, when you confuse avoiding responsibility with going with the flow. I've watched brilliant people destroy their lives with this counterfeit Wu Wei. A talented artist I knew spent 3 years trusting the process, instead of developing her craft or building her career. She called it spiritual practice while her skills atrophied and her bank account emptied. An entrepreneur friend dissolved his successful business because maintaining it felt like swimming upstream against the universe's plan. Never mind that he'd built something valuable that employed 12 people. These aren't isolated cases. They're the inevitable result of misunderstanding one of the most sophisticated concepts in human consciousness. The Hermetic principle of mentalism states that the all is mind, everything begins in consciousness before manifesting in physical reality. But here's what the spiritual bypassing crowd gets catastrophically wrong. This doesn't mean you can think your way to success while avoiding all action. It means that consciousness is the creative force that directs and shapes action. When you adopt passive surrender as your default mode, you're actually surrendering your creative power. You're abdicating the very mental authority that the Hermetic masters understood as fundamental to creation itself. True Wu Wei isn't the absence of will, its will aligned so perfectly with natural principles that effort becomes effortless. Watch a master craftsman work, a Japanese sword maker, a Swiss watchmaker, a world-class chef. Their movements flow like water, but every gesture emerges from decades of disciplined practice. They're not fighting against their materials, they're dancing with them. The steel wants to become a sword. The chef simply helps it remember its true nature. This is Wu Wei in action, not passive waiting, but dynamic receptivity. Not the absence of intention, but intention so refined it appears effortless. The corruption runs deeper than individual misunderstanding. Modern flow state culture has weaponized this ancient wisdom into an excuse for procrastination. I'm waiting for inspiration. I'll start when it feels right. I don't want to force anything. These phrases have become spiritual, sounding justifications for avoiding the very engagement that creates genuine flow. Real flow isn't something that happens to you. It's something you cultivate through deliberate practice and then allow to emerge at the perfect moment. Olympic athletes don't wait for flow states to strike randomly during competition. They train their nervous systems to access flow on command when the stakes are highest. Consider water, the classic Wu Wei metaphor that Laozi used 25 centuries ago. Water doesn't achieve its power through passive surrender. It achieves power through persistent, intelligent adaptation. Water finds the crack in the rock and applies pressure for centuries until mountains crumble. Water doesn't fight the riverbank. It carves new channels when the old ones no longer serve. Water is patient, but it's never passive. It's always moving, always responding, always finding the most efficient path toward its destination. This brings us to perhaps the most crucial distinction: the difference between fighting life's currents and learning to surf them. Fighting the current means struggling against natural forces through brute effort and rigid thinking. But the false alternative isn't floating helplessly wherever the current takes you. The real alternative is developing the skill to read the currents so accurately that you can navigate them with precision and grace. A master surfer doesn't fight the wave or surrender to it. She becomes one with its energy while maintaining complete agency over her direction and speed. This is what we've lost in our spiritual laziness epidemic. We've forgotten that true power comes from the marriage of surrender and skill, of receptivity and responsibility, of flowing with natural forces while maintaining absolute clarity about where we're going. The ancient masters weren't passive dreamers waiting for cosmic handouts. They were the most skilled, most disciplined, most precisely attuned individuals of their time. Their effortlessness was earned through decades of effortful practice, and that's exactly what we need to reclaim. Picture yourself standing at the edge of a vast, churning ocean. The waves crash with thunderous power. Salt spray stings your face, and the horizon stretches endlessly in all directions. This isn't just any ocean. It's the ocean of life itself, containing every force, every opportunity, every challenge you'll ever encounter. Now watch two people enter this same water, and pay close attention to what happens next. The first person, let's call him the swimmer, charges into the waves with pure determination. His jaw is clenched, his fists are tight, and he's absolutely convinced that success means conquering this ocean through sheer force of will. Watch him as he hits the first wave head-on. His shoulders burn as he fights against the current. His breathing becomes labored, desperate gasps between the relentless assault of water. Every stroke is a battle. Every breath is earned through exhaustion. You can see the veins bulging in his neck as he pushes harder, convinced that if he just tries more, fights more, forces more, he'll somehow bend this infinite ocean to his will. After 30 minutes of this brutal combat, he's managed to move maybe 50 yards. His energy is nearly spent, his muscles scream in protest, and the ocean seems to mock his efforts with wave after wave of resistance. This swimmer represents how most of us approach life. We see every obstacle as an enemy to defeat, every challenge as something to overpower through raw effort. We burn ourselves out in meetings, trying to force our ideas through corporate bureaucracy. We exhaust ourselves in relationships, attempting to change people through argument and pressure. We drain our bank accounts and our sanity chasing goals by swimming upstream against the natural currents of reality. But now watch the second person, the surfer. She enters this exact same ocean, feeling the identical waves, facing the same wild forces. But something is fundamentally different about her approach. Instead of charging into battle, she pauses. She observes. She feels the rhythm beneath the chaos. The surfer understands something the swimmer missed entirely. This ocean isn't her enemy. It's the source of her power. She wades in slowly, her body relaxed, her breathing steady. While the swimmer was fighting the waves, she's reading them. She notices how every seventh wave carries more power. She feels the subtle shift in the current that signals a larger set approaching. She positions herself not where she wants to go, but where the ocean wants to take her. Then comes that magical moment. She spots her wave, not the biggest, not the most obvious, but the right one. She turns, paddles with the current instead of against it, and suddenly the same force that exhausted the swimmer launches her forward with breathtaking speed and grace. She's moving faster than the swimmer ever dreamed possible, and she's barely exerting any effort at all. What just happened here reveals one of the most profound secrets in all of Hermetic wisdom, the principle of polarity. Both the swimmer and the surfer dealt with identical energy, the same ocean, the same waves, the same forces. But they operated at opposite poles of that energy. The swimmer operated at the negative pole of resistance, where every action creates an equal and opposite reaction. The harder he pushed, the harder life pushed back. The more force he applied, the more friction he encountered. He was trapped in what Hermes Trismegistus called the lower vibration of struggle. The surfer operated at the positive pole of mastery, where she became a conduit for the very forces she wanted to harness. She discovered what the ancient texts call mental transmutation, the ability to consciously shift your polarity from force to flow, from resistance to resonance. This isn't mystical nonsense. This is practical wisdom you can verify in your own life right now. Think about the last time you tried to force a conversation with someone who was clearly not ready to listen. Remember how exhausting that felt. You were the swimmer, fighting against the natural current of their resistance. Now recall a moment when you waited, listened, and found the perfect opening to share your thoughts. Suddenly, they were receptive, engaged, even grateful. You had become the surfer, riding the wave of their natural receptivity. The ancient Hermetic masters understood that mental transmutation isn't about changing external circumstances, it's about changing your relationship to those circumstances. When you shift from the pole of resistance to the pole of mastery, you're not becoming passive, you're becoming precise. The surfer isn't lazy, she's strategic. She doesn't avoid effort, she applies effort at exactly the right moment in exactly the right direction. She understands that power isn't about how hard you can push, it's about how accurately you can align with forces far greater than yourself. Here's where most people get confused. They think Wu Wei means giving up, becoming a passive observer of life. But watch that surfer again. The moment she catches her wave, she's intensely active. She's making micro-adjustments, reading the water, carving her path with precision and skill. The difference is that her effort is amplified by natural forces instead of fighting against them. This is why Thoth's technique was considered forbidden knowledge. When you truly understand polarity and mental transmutation, you stop being a victim of circumstances and start becoming a master of energy itself. You begin to recognize the waves in every area of your life, the natural rhythms in your career, your relationships, your creative projects, your financial growth. Most people spend their entire lives as swimmers, exhausting themselves in futile battles against currents they never learned to read. They wonder why success feels so hard, why breakthrough moments are so rare, why they're always tired despite working constantly. But once you develop surfer consciousness, everything changes. You start noticing the subtle signs that indicate when someone is ready to hear your message. You recognize the market conditions that signal opportunity instead of fighting for sales during downturns. You feel the natural timing for taking action versus the wisdom of strategic patience. The ocean is still vast. The waves are still powerful. The challenges are still real. But now you're working with forces instead of against them. Now you're riding energy instead of burning it. Now you're a master of polarity instead of its victim. The question is, which person are you going to be the next time you face life's inevitable waves? Look at water for a moment. Really look at it. If you judged by appearances alone, you'd call it the weakest substance on Earth. It has no fixed shape, no backbone, no resistance whatsoever. Push against it, and your hand slides right through. Try to grab it, and it slips between your fingers. Cut it with a sword, and it immediately flows back together, completely unharmed. Every ancient philosopher noticed this apparent weakness, yet they all came to the same startling conclusion: water holds the master key to unlimited power. Here's what they understood that most people miss entirely. While you're busy trying to muscle your way through obstacles, declaring war on your problems, and exhausting yourself in direct confrontation, water is quietly reshaping the entire planet. The Grand Canyon wasn't carved by dynamite or jackhammers. It was carved by water, one drop at a time, over millions of years. The Colorado River didn't announce its intentions or fight the rock face to face. It simply kept flowing, applying gentle but relentless pressure, finding every tiny crack and weakness, until it had carved one of the most magnificent structures on Earth. Think about the hardest granite boulder you've ever seen. Solid, immovable, seemingly eternal. Yet walk along any ancient riverbed and you'll find these same boulders transformed into smooth, perfectly rounded stones. Water did that, not through violence or force, but through patience and persistence. It touched that granite millions of times, each contact so gentle you wouldn't even notice it, until the hardest rock surrendered its sharp edges and became something entirely new. This is the intelligence that ancient masters spent lifetimes trying to understand and embody. Water doesn't waste energy fighting what it cannot immediately change. When it encounters a mountain, it doesn't try to knock it down. Instead, it flows around it, finding the path of least resistance, while simultaneously beginning the slow work of transformation. It seeps into microscopic cracks, freezes and expands, then melts and flows, deeper, year after year, decade after decade, until mountains themselves bow to its patient persistence. The alchemists understood this principle on a much deeper level. They called water the universal solvent, but they weren't just talking about chemistry. They recognized that water represents a state of consciousness, capable of dissolving the rigid structures that keep us trapped. Your crystallized traumas, your hardened belief systems, your ego's defensive walls, these are like rocks in water's path. They seem permanent and immovable until you learn to apply water's strategy. Consider how this applies to the Hermetic principle. As above, so below. Water's behavior in the physical world mirrors exactly how consciousness can operate on the mental plane. Just as water finds cracks in rock, fluid consciousness finds openings in any problem or challenge. It doesn't attack the obstacle head-on. It surrounds it, studies it, and gradually dissolves it from within. Let me give you a concrete example. You're dealing with a difficult person at work, someone who seems completely unreasonable and defensive. The direct approach would be confrontation. Argue your points, prove them wrong, force them to see your perspective. This is like trying to break a rock with a hammer. Sometimes it works, but more often it just creates more fragments and more resistance. The water approach is entirely different. You don't attack their position, you flow around it. You ask questions instead of making statements. You find small areas of agreement and gently expand them. You listen for the fears and insecurities beneath their defensiveness and address those instead of their surface arguments. Over time, their rigid stance begins to soften, not because you forced it to, but because you dissolved the underlying structure that was holding it in place. This same principle applies to business obstacles. When you encounter market resistance, regulatory challenges, or competitive threats, the water strategy isn't to fight harder, it's to find the cracks in the situation where your solution can flow. Maybe the direct market is saturated, but there's an underserved niche. Maybe the current regulations create an opportunity for a different approach. Maybe your competitor's strength reveals a blind spot you can fill. In personal relationships, water's wisdom is transformative. Instead of trying to change your partner through criticism or demands, you change the environment around the issue. You create space for new possibilities to emerge. You address your own patterns first, which naturally shifts the entire dynamic. You become curious about their perspective instead of defensive about your own. The key insight here is that water's power comes from its complete lack of rigidity. It can become any shape, fit any container, flow through any opening. This adaptability isn't weakness, it's the ultimate strength. While rigid structures eventually break under pressure, water simply adjusts and continues flowing toward its destination. Now, pause and honestly examine your own life. Where are you being rigid? Where are you trying to force outcomes through sheer willpower? Where are you exhausting yourself by pushing directly against immovable obstacles? Maybe it's a career goal that seems blocked by gatekeepers and politics. Maybe it's a health challenge that isn't responding to direct interventions. Maybe it's a family dynamic that's been stuck in the same patterns for years. These situations aren't necessarily problems to be solved through more effort. They might be rocks waiting for water's patient wisdom. But here's where water's strategy reaches its limits, and why the ancient masters knew they needed to understand both the gentle flow and the sudden storm. Water's patient dissolution works beautifully for gradual transformation, for long-term change, for situations where you have time to let pressure build slowly. But what happens when life doesn't give you that luxury? What happens when the challenge is immediate, violent, and demands an instant response? That's when you need to understand water's other face, the face that creates tsunamis, hurricanes, and flash floods. The same element that patiently carves canyons can also move mountains in a single day when conditions align properly. The masters who truly understood Thoth's teachings knew both expressions of power were necessary. They learned when to be the gentle stream and when to be the devastating flood. This dual nature of water holds the secret to handling any situation life throws at you, whether it requires patient persistence or immediate, overwhelming force. Picture this. Dark clouds gather on the horizon, rolling in like a massive wall of destruction. The wind begins to whisper, then howl, carrying with it the promise of absolute chaos. In a vast forest, two very different beings prepare to face what's coming. The oak tree stands magnificent, 200 years of growth, roots diving 30 feet deep, trunk so wide it would take 6 people holding hands to circle it. Its branches stretch toward the heavens like the arms of a titan. As the first gusts hit, the oak's response is immediate and absolute. I will not bend. I am strength incarnate. My ancestors weathered storms for centuries. Nothing, absolutely nothing, will move me. This oak embodies everything our culture teaches us about power. Stand firm, never show weakness. Meet force with greater force. The storm intensifies, and the oak doubles down on its strategy. Every fiber of its being resists. Its massive trunk becomes a wall against the wind, its branches locked in position like a fortress under siege. But here's what the oak doesn't understand about the universe's mechanics. When you offer total resistance to an unstoppable force, that force has no choice but to apply its full power against you. The wind, finding no give in the oak's structure, begins to compress and accelerate around it. Physics demands equilibrium. The more rigidly the oak stands, the more violently the air must move to find its path. Then comes the sound no one expects, not the whoosh of wind, but the deep, ominous crack of wood under impossible stress. 2 centuries of growth, undone in seconds. The mighty oak, with all its strength and deep roots, crashes to the earth, its rigid magnificence now its downfall. 50 yards away, something entirely different unfolds. A bamboo grove faces the same storm with a completely opposite philosophy. As the wind strikes, these slender stalks don't resist, they dance. Their tops bend so far, they nearly kiss the ground. They sway and flow like water made solid, their entire structure moving in harmony with forces that would destroy rigid opposition. The storm rages over the bamboo for hours. Watching from above, you'd think these delicate plants couldn't possibly survive what just destroyed the mighty oak. Yet when dawn breaks and the winds finally calm, something remarkable happens. Slowly, gracefully, each bamboo stalk returns to vertical. Not only have they survived, they appear stronger, their roots more firmly established from the workout, their flexibility proven and enhanced. This isn't just a nature story. This is the universe teaching us about the hermetic principle of gender, not biological gender, but the masculine and feminine forces that govern all existence. The oak represents unbalanced masculine energy, pure projection, rigid structure, force, meeting force. It knew only one way to be powerful, and that limitation destroyed it. The bamboo embodies perfect balance. It maintains masculine structure. Those stalks are incredibly strong and purposeful in their growth. But it couples that strength with feminine receptivity, the wisdom to yield when yielding serves survival, to flow when flowing preserves the whole. Think about your own life for a moment. Where are you being the oak? Where are you standing rigid against forces that could be navigated with flexibility instead? I see it constantly in careers. Someone gets feedback from their boss, and instead of listening for the valuable information within it, they become defensive, rigid, meeting criticism with counter-criticism. They stand like the oak, proud and unmovable, until eventually the organizational winds snap their position entirely. They get fired, transferred, or marginalized, wondering how their strength led to defeat. The bamboo approach looks different. You maintain your core values and professional standards. That's your masculine structure. But you listen, adapt your methods, find creative ways to address concerns while staying true to your deeper purpose. You bend without breaking, and often discover that the storm of feedback actually helps you grow stronger. In relationships, the oak shows up as the person who must always be right, who turns every disagreement into a battle of wills. They plant their feet and declare, "This is how I am, take it or leave it." They confuse rigidity with authenticity, stubbornness with strength. Eventually, the relationship winds become too strong, and something breaks, usually the connection itself. The bamboo partner maintains their core identity and values while staying flexible in how they express love, resolve conflicts, and navigate the inevitable storms that test every relationship. They understand that yielding in small things preserves what matters most. But here's where this gets really practical. Developing what I call storm sensitivity, the ability to recognize when you're facing forces that require bamboo wisdom rather than oak resistance. Your body gives you the first clue. When you're being the oak, you'll feel tension, tightness, a sense of bracing against something. Your jaw might clench, your shoulders might rise. This is your system preparing for battle. Sometimes battle is necessary, but often it's just habit. The bamboo state feels different. There's alertness without tension, strength without rigidity. You're present and responsive rather than reactive and defensive. You can feel this difference once you start paying attention. Here's a technique that changes everything. When you notice yourself going rigid in any situation, pause and ask, what am I really trying to protect here? Often, you'll discover that your core values or goals aren't actually threatened. You're just defending your ego's preference for being right or maintaining a particular image. The master of Wu Wei cultivates both energies consciously. They develop the oak's strength and deep-rootedness in purpose, but they couple it with the bamboo's fluid intelligence. They know when to stand firm and when to yield, when to be water and when to be bamboo. This is the secret that transforms how you navigate every challenge. True power isn't about never bending. It's about bending in service of what matters most, so you never break. The storm will always come. The question is, will you meet it as the oak or the bamboo? There's a voice in your head right now. It's been talking non-stop since you woke up this morning, maybe even kept you awake last night. It's the voice that's already planning your response to what I'm saying, organizing your to-do list, replaying that awkward conversation from yesterday, and frantically calculating how you're going to handle tomorrow's challenges. This voice believes it's your ally. It thinks it's protecting you by staying vigilant, by trying to control every variable, by never letting you rest. But here's what the ancient masters knew that we've forgotten. This voice is actually the source of most of your suffering. They called it the controller mode, and it's the invisible enemy operating inside everyone's mind. Listen to it right now. It's probably saying something like, "I need to manage this situation," or "If I don't plan this perfectly, everything will fall apart," or "I can't trust anyone else to handle this correctly." The controller mode is that incessant internal taskmaster demanding you plan, manage, force, and manipulate every detail of your existence. What drives this voice? Pure terror. It's absolutely convinced that the moment you stop gripping the steering wheel of your life with white knuckles, everything will spiral into chaos. It keeps you awake at 2 a.m. replaying conversations, analyzing what you should have said differently. It has you mentally rehearsing tomorrow's meetings during today's dinner. It never stops because it believes stopping equals disaster. But here's the cruel irony that Thoth understood thousands of years ago. This desperate attempt at control actually creates the very chaos it's trying to prevent. Think about water again, our teacher from earlier. What happens when you try to hold water with closed fists? The tighter your grip, the more it slips through your fingers. The controller mode operates exactly like those closed fists. When you're in controller mode, you create resistance everywhere you go. People feel your need to manage them and they push back. Opportunities slip away because you're too busy forcing outcomes that aren't meant to happen. You miss the subtle signals the universe is sending because you're too busy broadcasting your own agenda. The very act of trying to control creates resentment, missed connections, and exhaustion. I watched this play out with a brilliant entrepreneur I knew who micromanaged every aspect of her growing company. She believed that without her constant oversight, everything would collapse. But her tight control created exactly what she feared. Her best employees left because they felt suffocated. Innovation stopped because everyone was afraid to make decisions without her approval. The company began to stagnate precisely because of her iron grip on every detail. The Hermetic teachings explain this perfectly. They distinguished between two fundamental modes of consciousness: profane consciousness and initiatic consciousness. Profane consciousness is ego identification. It's when you believe you are the controller, when you think your small self must manage the infinite complexity of existence. This is the consciousness of separation, fear, and endless struggle. Initiatic consciousness is something entirely different. It's what Thoth called the sensitive observer mode. This isn't passivity or giving up responsibility. It's radical curiosity combined with inner stillness. It's the bamboo from our storm example, flexible, responsive, but deeply rooted in something unshakable. When you operate from sensitive observer mode, you become like water. You stay alert and aware, but you stop trying to force outcomes. You notice what's actually happening instead of being lost in mental projections about what should be happening. You respond to reality instead of fighting it. Now here's where Thoth's forbidden technique comes in, and why it was considered so dangerous to conventional thinking. He taught the principle of correspondence applied internally: as above, so below, as within, so without. But most people try to change the without, the external circumstances. They exhaust themselves trying to manipulate people, situations, and outcomes. Thoth revealed the revolutionary truth: external reality is just the plane of effects. Internal reality is the plane of causes. Instead of trying to change what's happening around you, retreat to your inner sanctuary and identify which internal state is resonating with the unwanted external reality. Are you experiencing chaos in your relationships? Look inside. What internal state of anxiety, control, or fear is broadcasting that frequency? Are opportunities consistently slipping away? Examine what internal state of scarcity or desperation might be repelling what you're trying to attract. This is mental alchemy, the science of transmutation on the causal plane. When you shift your inner state from fear to trust, from anger to peace, from desperation to calm confidence, external reality must readjust by law. It has no choice because you've changed the fundamental frequency you're broadcasting. I experienced this firsthand during a period when nothing seemed to work in my business. I was in full controller mode, frantically trying to force results, manipulate outcomes, push harder. The more I pushed, the more resistance I encountered. Then I remembered Thoth's teaching. Instead of trying to change my external circumstances, I went within and found the internal state creating this external chaos. A deep fear of not being enough, of failing, of losing control. I didn't try to eliminate the fear, that's just more control. Instead, I observed it with curiosity. I felt it fully without trying to change it. And in that space of pure observation, something shifted. The fear transmuted naturally into a quiet confidence, a trust in the process. Within days, the external situation began to shift. Opportunities appeared. People responded differently. The same actions that had created resistance before now created flow. This is the forbidden technique because it threatens the entire structure of a control-based society. If people realized they could achieve results by working on the causal plane of consciousness rather than exhausting themselves on the plane of effects, everything would change. The next time you catch yourself in controller mode, and you will, probably within the next hour, try this instead. Pause, breathe, and ask yourself, what internal state am I broadcasting right now that's creating this external experience? Then simply observe that state with curiosity without trying to change it. Watch what happens. The oak tree tries to control the storm and breaks. The bamboo observes the storm and dances with it, emerging stronger than before. Which will you choose to be? What if I told you that every master alchemist, from the ancient temples of Egypt to the Renaissance laboratories of Europe, possessed what they called the inner compass, a navigation system more precise than any GPS, more reliable than any external advisor? This wasn't mystical mumbo-jumbo. This was practical magic in its purest form. The traffic light system isn't some new age invention. It's the rediscovery of how consciousness actually communicates with itself when we stop drowning out the signal with our mental noise. Remember that controller mode we talked about? It's like driving through life with the radio blasted so loud you can't hear the engine knocking, the tires losing grip, or the GPS trying to reroute you around the massive accident ahead. Here's how it works in the real world, and I want you to test this immediately in your own experience. The green light appears when you're in vibrational harmony with what's unfolding. I'm not talking about some abstract energy concept here. I'm talking about measurable, observable phenomena. When you walk into a business meeting and the conversation flows like water finding its natural course. When the other person's body language mirrors yours without conscious effort. When objections dissolve before you even address them, and what should have been a negotiation becomes a collaboration. I watched this happen with a client who'd been struggling to close a major deal for months. He'd been pushing, presenting, following up relentlessly, pure controller mode. The harder he pushed, the more resistance he met. Then he learned to read the signals. The next time he walked into that boardroom, something had shifted, not in his strategy, but in his state. The energy was different from the moment he entered. Conversations that had been stilted became natural. Questions that had felt like interrogations became genuine curiosity. The deal closed itself. This is the fire element in action. Masculine projection meeting zero resistance because it's aligned with the natural flow of the situation. Green light means accelerate. Act with confidence. Trust the momentum. But here's the crucial part. You're not forcing the acceleration. You're recognizing when the universe is already accelerating in your direction and choosing to match that energy. Then there's the red light. And most people completely misread this signal. They think it means try harder, push through, overcome the resistance. This is exactly backwards. Red light is vibrational dissonance, a clear message that your internal state is out of sync with what's trying to emerge. I remember watching a brilliant entrepreneur destroy a potential partnership because she couldn't read the red lights flashing everywhere. Every conversation became an argument. Simple requests turned into complex negotiations. Emails that should have taken minutes to write became agonizing exercises in diplomatic wordsmithing. The other party kept finding reasons to delay, to reconsider, to involve more people in decisions that should have been straightforward. She kept interpreting this as, they need more convincing, when the real message was, stop, reassess, dissolve the approach entirely. Red light calls for the water element, feminine receptivity, the willingness to dissolve your current strategy and let something new emerge. This isn't weakness, it's the most advanced form of strategic thinking. When you hit a genuine red light, forcing through is like trying to perform surgery with a sledgehammer. You might eventually break through, but you'll destroy everything valuable in the process. The master alchemist recognizes that red light is information, not opposition. It's the situation telling you that your current vibrational state, your internal mix of intention, expectation, and energy, isn't a match for what wants to happen. But the most subtle and perhaps most important signal is the yellow light. This is the transition phase, when energy is shifting between poles and clarity hasn't emerged yet. Most people panic in yellow light situations. The controller mode kicks in hard because uncertainty triggers every survival mechanism we have. Yellow light requires what the alchemists called the distillation phase, pure observation without the compulsion to act. This is where you develop the sensitivity of a true master. You're watching energy patterns the way a skilled sailor reads wind and current, not just reacting to where the waves are hitting your boat right now, but sensing where the weather system is moving. I've seen this play out countless times in creative projects. You're working on something important, and suddenly you hit that zone where you're not sure if you're on the right track. The work feels neither effortless nor impossible, it's just unclear. Amateur creators either abandon the project or force it toward completion. Masters recognize this as the yellow light phase, where the project is reorganizing itself at a deeper level. During yellow light, you maintain engagement without attachment to specific outcomes. You keep showing up, keep observing, keep making small adjustments, but you're not trying to force resolution. You're letting the situation ripen until the energy clarifies into either green or red. This develops what I call master-level sensitivity. Instead of driving through life with your eyes closed, only noticing when you crash into something, you're reading the energy signatures of situations before they fully manifest. You notice when someone's enthusiasm is genuine versus polite. You sense when a business opportunity has real momentum versus surface-level interest. You feel when a creative project is ready to be shared versus needing more incubation. This isn't about becoming passive or indecisive, it's about becoming incredibly precise in your timing and approach. Think about how a master chef knows exactly when to flip the fish, when to add the seasoning, when to take the dish off the heat. They're not following a rigid timeline. They're reading the actual signals the food is giving them. But here's where most people get stuck, and this brings us to the most crucial question. What do you do when you're facing a solid red light situation that you can't simply walk away from? When you're in a relationship that's hitting constant resistance but you're committed to making it work? When you're in a business that's fighting you at every turn but you've invested everything in it? When you're pursuing a dream that seems to be rejecting you but giving up feels like death? This is where we encounter the most powerful technique in the mental alchemist's arsenal. A method so counterintuitive that it seems like madness until you experience its results. Most people try to change the external situation when they hit a red light. Masters know that the real power lies in changing the internal state that's creating the vibrational dissonance in the first place. The question isn't how to force your way through the red light. The question is, what internal transformation would turn this red light into a green light? And the answer to that question will revolutionize everything you think you know about creating change in your life. In all my years studying ancient wisdom traditions and human psychology, I've discovered that the most profound act of power any human being can perform isn't what you'd expect. It's not conquering nations, accumulating wealth, or dominating others. It's something far more subtle, yet infinitely more transformative. It's what I call the sage's pause. Let me paint you a picture. You're in a heated argument with your spouse. They've just said something that hits you right in the gut. Maybe they've questioned your competence, brought up an old wound, or dismissed something you care deeply about. In that instant, your nervous system floods with adrenaline. Your mind immediately starts crafting the perfect comeback, the devastating response that will put them in their place. This is the moment where most people become prisoners. See, your conditioned mind has been trained since childhood to react instantly to resistance. Red light appears, someone challenges you, criticizes you, blocks your path, and boom, the automatic response kicks in. Fight, argue, defend, attack, force your way through. It happens so fast you don't even realize you've lost control. But here's what's really happening in that moment. You've just become a pawn. External circumstances are now moving you around the chessboard of life like you're a piece of wood. Your spouse's words, Your boss's criticism, that driver who cut you off, they're all pulling your strings, making you dance to their rhythm. The ancient Hermetic texts describe this as being trapped on the plane of effects, the noisy, chaotic physical world where everything seems to happen to you. You're bouncing around like a pinball, reacting to each bump and collision, completely at the mercy of whatever force hits you next. This is exactly what Thoth meant when he taught that man is a star trapped in a body until freed through struggle. But here's the crucial part most people miss. It's not external struggle he's talking about. It's the internal battle against your own compulsive patterns. The sage's pause breaks this hypnotic spell. Picture this same scenario, but now you've learned this ancient technique. Your spouse delivers that cutting remark. You feel the familiar surge of reactive energy. But instead of immediately responding, you do something revolutionary. You pause. Not hesitation. Not weakness. Not because you don't know what to say. This is a deliberate, conscious creation of sacred space between stimulus and response. In the Hermetic tradition, this is called retreat into the inner sanctuary, moving from that noisy plane of effects to the silent plane of causes, the mental realm where true power resides. You're literally stepping out of the matrix of automatic reactivity. This pause might last 3 conscious breaths. It might last 3 hours while you go for a walk. Sometimes it lasts 3 days while you really contemplate what's happening beneath the surface. The duration doesn't matter. What matters is that you've reclaimed 100% choice in how you respond. I watched a CEO friend of mine use this technique during a hostile takeover attempt. The acquiring company's lawyers were across the table making aggressive demands, trying to intimidate him into accepting their lowball offer. The old version of him would have fought fire with fire, gotten into a shouting match, made threats. Instead, he paused. Right there in the conference room, he said, "I need to consider this carefully. Let's reconvene tomorrow." His own lawyers thought he was crazy, showing weakness at a crucial moment. But what happened in that pause was pure magic. He stepped back from the emotional chaos and saw the situation clearly. He realized they were desperate, that their aggression was actually a sign of weakness. From that centered place, he crafted a response that was so precisely calibrated, so perfectly timed, that it completely shifted the power dynamic. By the next meeting, he was setting the terms. This is what I mean by righteous action, not reactive noise, but movement that emerges from true understanding. It's like Archimedes said, "Give me a lever and a fulcrum, and I will move the world." The sage's pause provides the fulcrum. Righteous action becomes the lever. I've seen this principle transform marriages that were headed for divorce. One partner learns to pause instead of immediately defending when criticized. In that space, they hear what their spouse is really saying underneath the harsh words, maybe fear, maybe hurt, maybe a desperate plea for connection. The response that emerges from this understanding is completely different from what their reactive mind would have produced. A client of mine was about to quit her dream job because her new manager seemed impossible to work with. Every interaction felt like a battle. I taught her the sage's pause, and something fascinating happened. She started noticing that her manager's harshest criticism always came right after meetings with his own boss. In the pause, she realized he wasn't attacking her, he was transferring his own stress and fear. Her next response came from this deeper understanding. Instead of defending herself, she asked him how she could better support him during these challenging times. The entire dynamic shifted overnight. But here's where most people sabotage themselves, and it's crucial you understand this as we move toward the final step. They learn about the sage's pause, they see its power, and then anxiety creeps in. They start worrying, what if I pause and then don't know what to do? What if the perfect response doesn't come? What if I look weak or indecisive? This anxiety is actually the old controller mode making one last desperate attempt to maintain power. It's trying to convince you that you need to figure everything out in advance, that you need to have the perfect plan before you can trust this process. That's exactly backwards. The magic happens because you don't know what's coming next. The pause creates space for something beyond your conditioned patterns to emerge. Call it intuition, wisdom, or divine guidance. But it only works when you truly let go of trying to control the outcome. Think about it. Your reactive mind has been running the show for decades, and where has it gotten you? How many relationships has it damaged? How many opportunities has it cost you? How much peace has it stolen? The sage's pause is your declaration of independence from that tyranny. It's the moment you stop being a victim of circumstances and reclaim your birthright as a conscious creator of your experience. In our final section, I'm going to share the one practice that ties everything together, the daily ritual that makes this transformation permanent and automatic. But first, you need to commit to trying the sage's pause in your own life, starting today. Now we arrive at the final revelation, the one truth that dissolves every struggle you've ever known. Everything I've shared with you, the traffic light system, the sage's pause, the ancient wisdom of Thoth, has been preparing you for this moment of recognition. You've been living under the most fundamental case of mistaken identity in human existence. Right now, as you listen to these words, you believe you are a separate being struggling against life. You think you're the rock in the riverbed, solid and isolated, with the current of existence rushing around you, sometimes gently, sometimes violently. Every moment of suffering in your life stems from this single illusion. But here's what the mystics, the sages, and the quantum physicists are all pointing toward. You are not the rock. You never were. You are the river itself. This isn't poetic metaphor. This is the most accurate description of reality, according to every genuine wisdom tradition that has ever existed. The Vedantic seers called it Tat Tvam Asi, thou art that. The Sufis spoke of Fana, the dissolution of the false self. Even modern neuroscience is catching up to what the ancients knew. The sense of being a separate, solid self is a construction of the brain, not an actual entity. Think about what you actually are beneath all the mental commentary. You are consciousness experiencing itself through a particular focal point. You're not a wave separate from the ocean. You are the ocean expressing itself as a wave. The wave doesn't fight the ocean's movement. It is the ocean's movement. When you truly grasp this, something extraordinary happens. The entire framework of struggle collapses instantly. How can the river fight against its own flow? It's absurd, like a cell declaring war on its own body, like your left hand trying to defeat your right hand. This understanding transforms everything about how you navigate existence. Remember those red lights we discussed? When you know you're the river, you don't crash against obstacles, you flow around them. The rock in your path doesn't stop you. It simply redirects your current in a new direction. Sometimes that redirection leads to discoveries you never would have made on your original course. The green lights become even more magical. Instead of chasing opportunities, you feel them as currents in your own being. That perfect job opening, that chance encounter, that sudden inspiration. These aren't external events happening to you. They're movements of the same consciousness you are, creating pathways for its own expression. Modern science has stumbled onto this truth through the study of flow states. Researchers discovered something remarkable. Peak human performance occurs when the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that creates the sense of separate self, literally shuts down. They call it transient hypofrontality. The ego goes offline and suddenly you're not trying to perform, you are the performance itself. Michael Jordan described this perfectly after his legendary flu game. I wasn't thinking about anything, I was just playing. The greatest butcher in ancient China, Ding, told his emperor that after 19 years of cutting meat, his knife never dulled because he wasn't cutting against the grain, he was flowing with the natural structure of what he encountered. Every master throughout history has accessed this same state. They stopped being someone doing something and became the doing itself. The archer becomes the arrow's flight. The musician becomes the music. The writer becomes the words flowing onto the page. But here's what's truly revolutionary. You don't have to earn this state or achieve it through years of practice. It's your natural condition. The struggle only exists when you believe you're separate from what you're experiencing. The moment you remember your true nature as the flow itself, the fight instantly ceases. This is why forcing never works long term, why pushing against closed doors exhausts you, why swimming upstream leaves you depleted. You've been trying to make the river go where you think it should go, not realizing you are the river and it's already going exactly where it needs to go. Your desires, your inspirations, your natural impulses, these aren't random wants competing with reality. They're the river's intelligence expressing itself through your particular vantage point. When you feel that pull towards something, that's not separate. You wanting something from the universe. That's the universe wanting to experience itself through you. The traffic light system becomes effortless when you understand this. You're not reading external signals anymore. You're feeling your own currents. The resistance you encounter isn't life saying no to you. It's you saying no to yourself, usually because some conditioned pattern is trying to force a direction that isn't aligned with your deeper flow. This is the ultimate power Thoth encoded in his teachings. Not the power to control the river, but the power to remember you are the river. Not the ability to force outcomes, but the capacity to recognize yourself as the creative force behind all outcomes. So here's my challenge to you. For the next 7 days, experiment with this understanding. When you feel resistance, pause and ask, how is this obstacle redirecting my flow? When opportunities appear, instead of grasping at them, feel into them. Is this current aligned with my deeper movement? Most importantly, throughout each day, remind yourself, I am not the rock being pushed around by life. I am the creative intelligence of existence, expressing itself as this particular experience. Watch what happens when you stop fighting the current and start feeling yourself as the current. Notice how effortlessly solutions appear, how naturally the right people show up, how organically your path unfolds when you're not trying to control every twist and turn. This is the forbidden technique Thoth preserved for those ready to remember. The ultimate power isn't in doing anything at all. It's in recognizing what you've always been, the eternal flow of consciousness itself, temporarily forgetting its own nature for the joy of remembering it again. If this recognition is dawning in your awareness, if you're beginning to feel the truth of your fluid nature beneath the illusion of solid separation, let me know by typing, "I understood it," in the comments below.